Fairy tales are always cute and famous, but there are some extremely scary and disturbing ones that are not so well known. I'm going to bring some of those to you here today. Rumpelstiltskin. He would be the antagonist of a fairy tale of German origin called Jumping Dwarf. The tale was collected by the Grimm brothers and first published in 1812 in the Grimm's own collection, being revised in later editions, and occurs as follows. Once there was a poor miller with a beautiful daughter. Then it happened that he spoke with the king, and to impress him he said that his daughter could weave gold, or rather, turn straw into gold. The king then said that this would be a very useful gift, and if his daughter really did this, he should take her to his castle, and then he would test if this was really true. When the girl was brought to him, he led her to a room completely filled with straw, gave her a spinning wheel, and told her to work all night on it. And if in the morning he saw that the transformation of straw into gold had not happened, she would die. Then he locked the room door and she was left there alone. The poor miller's daughter sat there all night, and she didn't know what to do. She had no way to turn straw into gold. So she became more and more afraid and finally began to cry. But suddenly, the door opened and a little man walked in and said, "Good evening, Mrs. Miller. Why are you crying so much?" The girl replied that she had to turn straw into gold, but didn't know how. The little man said he could do it for her, but asked what he would get in return. The girl said she would give him a necklace. He also asked to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hype it up, and share the video, as it would help a lot. And if you also want a collection of books from the Grimm brothers, original stories, I'll leave a pinned link there too, along with the games, some gift cards, and everything else you might want to buy, okay? Just by using these links, you'll be helping me a lot too. And the little man then took the necklace, sat in front of the DTR machine, buzzed, pulled 3 times, and the reel was full. Then he put another one and buzzed, pulled 3 times, and the second one was also full. And so it went until morning. So all the straw was spun and all the reels were filled with pure gold. At sunrise, the king arrived and was surprised and happy to see the gold, but this made his heart even greedier for more. He had the miller's daughter taken to another room full of straw, and it was even bigger. He ordered her to spin it in one whole night, and if she valued her life, she should do it. The girl didn't know what to do again and cried once more. However, the door opened again and the little man appeared, and he asked what he would get this time if he again turned the straw into gold. So the girl offered the ring she had on her finger. The little man took the ring and once again began to spin. And the next morning that room was full of gold. The king was extremely happy when he saw this, but he was not satisfied. He wanted more gold. He had the miller's daughter taken to an even larger room full of straw and said that she would have to turn all of that into gold again. If she succeeded, she could become his wife. He thought he could turn her, even being a miller's daughter, into the richest woman in the world. When the girl was alone, the little man appeared for the 3rd time and asked what he would get if he turned that machine again. The girl said that this time she had nothing left, but then the little man made a proposal that if he had all that straw, the girl's first child would be his. As she thought that wouldn't happen, she accepted the proposal. Unsure of what else to do, she promised the little man all he asked for. In return, he once again turned everything there into gold. The king arrived in the morning, found all he wanted, and married the miller's daughter, making her queen. A year later, she gave birth to a beautiful child, having forgotten about the little dwarf. But at a certain point, he decided to return and asked for what she had promised. The queen was frightened and offered the little man all the wealth of the kingdom if he let her keep the child. But he said no. Something alive was much more valuable to him than any treasure in the world. Then the queen began to lament and cry so much that the little man felt sorry for her and said, "I will give you 3 days. If by then you know my name, you will keep the child." The queen spent the whole night thinking about all the names she had ever heard. Then she sent a messenger to the country to ask everywhere for all the other names that existed. When the little man came back the next day, she started with Caspar, Melchior, Balzer, and said in order all the names she knew. And after each of the words, the little man replied that that was not his name. On day 2, he inquired about the residents' names in the neighborhood. Then he quoted the most unusual and curious names to the little man, like lamb calf, beast rib, leg string. But none of these were the real name. On the 3rd day, the messenger returned and said that he could not find a single new name. But when he approached a high mountain in the corner of the forest, there where the fox and the hare say goodbye, he saw a little house. A fire was burning in front of the house, and a completely comical and strange little man was jumping around the fire. And on one leg only he shouted, "Today I will roast, tomorrow I will prepare, the queen's daughter I will fetch. From Humboldt I said she should not call me." And you can't imagine how happy the queen was to hear that name. Soon after, the little man entered and asked, "Now, Madam Queen, what is my name?" She first asked, "Is your name Cans?" He said, "No." "Is your name Heinz?" "No." "Is your name perhaps Rumpelstiltskin?" Just then, the furious little dwarf started screaming repeatedly, "Did the devil tell you that?" The little man screamed and in anger stomped his right foot so hard that he sank up to his waist. Soon after, he grabbed his left foot with both hands and tore himself in half. In the year of 1284, a mysterious man appeared in Hamelin. He wore a coat of colorful and shiny fabric, which is why he was called the Piper. He said he was a rat catcher and promised that for a certain amount of money, he would rid the city of all mice and rats. The citizens closed the deal, promising him a certain price. The rat catcher then took a small fife from his pocket and began to blow it. Rats and mice immediately came from all the houses and gathered in the tunnel of such a piper. When he thought he had all of them, he started to lead them to the Weser River, where he took off his clothes and entered the waters. All the animals followed him, fell in, and drowned. Now the citizens were free from their plague and regretted promising so much money to the piper. Making various excuses, they refused to pay him, leaving him bitter and angry as he departed. He returned on June 26th, the day of St. John and St. Paul, at dawn. At 7 o'clock, others say at noon, now dressed in a hunter's outfit, with a horrible expression on his face and wearing a strange red dress, and also a hat. And he went about his life on the streets. But this time, it wasn't rats. What came to him were children. A large number of boys and girls from the 4th year. Among them was the mayor's daughter. The swarm followed him to a mountain, and there they disappeared. All of this was seen by a fool carrying a child in his arms, and he followed at a distance. But then he turned around and brought the news back to the city. The anxious parents ran en masse to the city gates in search of their children. The mothers screamed and sobbed lamentably. Within an hour, messengers were sent everywhere, by water, by land, asking if the children or any of them had been seen. But it was all in vain. In total, 130 children were lost. 2, as some say, were left behind and returned. One of them was blind and the other mute. The blind one couldn't point out the location, but he knew how they had followed the piper. The mute man pointed out the location despite not hearing anything. A little boy who was wearing a sleeveless shirt ended up going back to the village to get a kind of shirt and thus escaped the tragedy. Because when he returned, the others had already disappeared into a cave inside a hill. This cave is still shown. In the mid-18th century, and probably still today, the street by which the children were led to the city gate was called Bangluzi Street. Without drums, silent or quiet, it can be translated like this. Because there, dance or music was not allowed. In fact, when a wedding procession on the way from the church crossed the street, the musicians had to stop playing. The mountain near Hamelin, where the children disappeared, is called Pompenberg. There, 2 stone monuments in the shape of crosses were erected, one on the left side and the other on the right side. Some say that the children were taken to the cave and returned in Transylvania. The citizens of Hamelin recorded this event in the municipal register and dated all their proclamations according to the years and days since the loss of their children. According to Seyfried, on the 22nd and the 26th of June, the following lines were written in the town hall. In the year of 1284, after the birth of Christ from Hamelin, 130 children born in this place were taken away by a piper to a mountain. And on the new gate was written 101 tendenos cum magus habe urgipuelos, duc serati entianus, Condita by this gate was built 272 years after the magician led the 130 children out of the town. In 1572, the mayor had the story depicted on the church windows. The accompanying inscription is now nearly illegible. In addition, a coin was minted in memory of the event. Once upon a time, there was a sorcerer in the form of a beggar who went from house to house begging for alms and kidnapping beautiful girls. And he knew where they were taken because they all disappeared without a trace. One day, he showed up at the door of a man who had 3 very beautiful daughters. He looked like a poor raggedy man with a bag on his back as if he was going to store what he received. He asked for the charity of a little food, and when the oldest daughter came to the door to give him a piece of bread, he pushed her with his hand and she jumped, not knowing how, into the bag. Shortly after that, in a great hurry, he left, taking her with him to his house in the heart of the forest. Everything in that house was luxurious, and he gifted her with everything she wanted, saying that the treasure he had there could give her everything she desired. And things went on like this for a few days. And then he said to her, "I have to make a trip and I need to leave you alone for some time. Here is the key to the house. You can go through it entirely and see everything there is in it, except, however, the room that opens with this little key. I forbid you to enter there under penalty of death." And he also gave her an egg, and he said, "Take great care of it. I advise you to always carry it with you so that it does not get lost. For if it is lost, a great misfortune will happen." She took the keys and the egg, promising to do everything right, the way he asked, and when he left, the girl ran to inspect the house from top to bottom, examining everything. The room shone with gold and silver, and she confessed in awe that she had never seen such magnificence. She arrived at the forbidden door. Despite wanting to pass by, her immense curiosity made resistance impossible. She looked at the key. It was a common key. Then she put it in the lock, turning it slowly. The door flung open. Then she saw what was there. Well, from here on out, the story is going to get a bit heavy, so continue at your own will. In the center of the room, she saw a bloodied basin, and inside that basin there were minced pieces. Minced pieces and not of animals, if you know what I mean. Upon seeing this, she felt such great terror that the egg slipped from her hand and fell into the basin. Quickly she picked up the egg, trying to clean the blood that stained everything. But it was a futile attempt. It didn't work. She couldn't clean it. Shortly after, the wizard returned from his trip, and the first thing he asked for was the key and the egg. Trembling, she handed over both. Seeing the red stains on the egg, he realized that she had entered the bloody room. Then he said that since she had entered the room, now she would go back there because she was going to die. Well, she was thrown on the floor, dragged by her hair, and ended up becoming part of the basin. So the sorcerer went out to fetch the second daughter. He transformed himself into a beggar and started to present himself at the door, asking for alms. The second daughter gave him a piece of bread, and she also ended up being put inside the sorcerer's bag. But she ended up like the first sister, was overcome by curiosity, and became part of the bloody room. Then he went to fetch the third sister, who was more prudent and cunning. After giving her the keys and the egg, she first of all kept the egg in a safe place and then visited the house from top to bottom, also opening the forbidden door. And she, of course, saw everything that was inside her dear sisters, all of them, right inside the basin. She carefully collected all the pieces of her sisters, put them together very neatly, head, trunk, arms, and legs, which once reassembled, began to move and revive. Soon after, the two sisters opened their resurrected eyes in immense joy. They hugged and kissed each other happily. When the sorcerer returned, he immediately asked for the keys and the egg, not finding any sign of blood on it. He said, "You passed the test well, so you will be my wife." Now that he no longer had any power over her, he had to do everything she wanted. Then she replied that, all right, she would be his wife. However, he would have to take a basket full of gold to her parents, but he must carry it on his back. Meanwhile, she would throw the entire party. After that, she ran to a small room where she had kept her sisters, hidden them, right? And she said that they would be taken home by the sorcerer himself. She ordered them to get into a basket, covered them well, spreading gold over them so that they would be well hidden from the sorcerer's gaze. And then she called him and said, "Now take the basket." but I will be watching from the window to see if you do not rest." The sorcerer began to walk, carrying the very heavy basket, with sweat dripping from his face. So he decided to sit down at no time to rest. But then, one of the sisters who was in the basket started to scream, saying that she was looking out the window, pretending to be the sister who was going to marry the sorcerer. The sorcerer resumed walking. He sat down again and another sister screamed. And so it went on along the way until finally the sorcerer handed over the basket with the two sisters to their parents. The bride prepared the wedding feast and invited the sorcerer's friends. Then she took a skull with its mocking smile, decorated it well, put a garland of flowers on it, and leaned it against the window as if it were looking out. When everything was ready, she got inside a barrel of honey, cut a quilt, and wrapped herself in feathers, thus resembling a strange bird that no one could recognize. She left the house, and on the way, she met some of the guests who asked her, "Where do you come from, strange bird?" "From a nest of feathers I emerge. What is the beautiful bride doing there?" She cleaned the house thoroughly and waited for the groom by the window. At last, a groom slowly returned and asked her the same question as the others. "Where do you come from, strange bird?" "From a nest of feathers I emerge. What is the beautiful bride doing?" She swept the little house from top to bottom. Now she waits for the groom at the window. The groom looked up and saw the little skull all decorated. Thinking it was the bride, he kindly signed to her. But he had just entered the house with the guests when the bride's relatives and brothers arrived. Sent to help, they locked all the doors so that no one could escape and set fire to the house, so that the sorcerer and all his rabble ended up burned inside their own house. If you've watched the video thus far, please like, subscribe, share, and comment if possible. See you next time.